Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I've just got a few books to tell you about today. I'm starting to group together the books that I've read in the past few months into categories. So you'll see by the title of this video that there seems to be a snakes theme. But before I get to that, I want to give you a happy report about my brain injury recovery in the category of visualization. It keeps getting better and better. So, for example, a little while ago, I noticed that the patchwork quilt on my bed, as one seam had come undone. When I woke up in the morning, I was thinking about how to mend that quilt, and I was able to visualize different methods of how I would go about fixing it, which made me very happy to be able to have pictures in my head when I wanted to have them there. And I did mend the quilt. I'll show you what it looks like. And another example, after I spent an hour or so scrolling through Ravelry. If you don't know, Ravelry is a database but also social media place on the web for knitters and crocheters to share projects that they're working on. And I recently finished making a cardigan for myself, and now I'm ready to embark on something new. So I was scrolling through for ideas about what to do with the yarn that I have in my stash. And after I stopped doing that, when I closed my eyes, images of knitted fabric came into my mind, unbidden. I wasn't even trying, but I could see lace and stockinette and various types of knitted stitches just there in my head. And I was so happy. I can't even tell you. I am starting to get pictures back when I read as well. So I will tell you more about that when I get to the books in this video. But first, I want to tell you about a really short 5-minute BBC video that I watched about reading and the brain. So I will link it down below. It made me think back to the work of the American cognitive neuroscientist Marianne Wolf. So one of the books that she wrote was called Proust and the Squid: The Story and Science of the Reading Brain. And I had the pleasure of hearing her speak at a conference that I helped organize, a conference about reading. This took place before COVID, so it seems like really the old days. And this particular book, Proust and the Squid, came out almost 20 years ago. So there's been a whole lot of new research on reading in the brain since then. If any of you have recommendations of good books for me to check out, let me know, all right? Okay, on to the books, starting with Slither: How Nature's Most Maligned Creatures Illuminate Our World. It's by Stephen Hall, who's an American science writer, and I listened to the audiobook. So this book covers a range of topics about snakes, including religion, art, culture, and science. For example, if you've ever wondered why the symbol for doctors and medical offices is a staff with 1 or 2 snakes on it, you can find out more about that in this book. It does have to do with Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. And one thing that was new to me is the idea and exalting of the healing powers of the arts. So in many Greek cities, including Athens, the temples to Asclepius were situated in close proximity to the Greek theaters. What else? I have a whole bunch of notes. As more women herpetologists entered the research on snakes, new questions were asked and new discoveries were made. So, for example, it has been discovered by a woman that snakes have a clitoris and there are nerve endings so that a female snake has the ability to feel pleasure. We also learned that snakes are individuals and have individual personalities, and also that they do care for their young. At least some species do. The style of the writing is very engaging. So, for example, chapter 7 is called No Legs, No Problem. And so this one is about locomotion. Snakes did used to have limbs, but discarded them along the evolutionary path. Now, snakes possess extraordinary sensory equipment. Oh, here's Frida. She wants to get on my lap. Okay, snakes. Stephen Hall writes, if you want new ideas, read old books. And he talks about a Estonian scientist who back in 1909 wrote about the concept of Umwelt. And if any of you have read An Immense World by Ed Yong, you will have encountered that concept. So here's an example. For a pit viper, their imagery of the external world is a combination of infrared and visual and auditory and motor signals. So they have a very different experience of the world around them. It's really hard to even imagine what that might be like. Stephen writes, it would be an exaggeration to say that pythons invented intermittent fasting maybe 70 million years ago, but not by much. And they weren't alone as innovators. Pythons, which evolved in Africa and Asia, developed a completely unique system to process food and manage energy. But so did boa constrictors, who followed a different evolutionary path in a different hemisphere, but still came up with the same metabolic tricks. So what are we talking about here? An adult rattlesnake only needs to eat one single squirrel, which has 500 or 700 calories, to maintain its weight for a year. The snake's metabolic wizardry is something that scientists are looking at closely because we can learn a lot from them. And next I want to mention another audiobook talking about learning from animals. This one is called The Arrogant Ape, The Myth of Human Exceptionalism and Why It Matters. It's by Christine Webb, and the audiobook is read by the author. She's a Harvard primatologist. And she writes that we are the most intelligent, virtuous, and successful species that ever lived is flawed thinking. And that's what enables us to exploit the Earth to its current planetary imbalance. She was asked, what is the most important attribute that humans can have? Is it empathy? And she said, it's humility. Throughout this book, she's talking about a paradigm shift in perspective. So changing from our moral obligation to other species to what we as humans stand to gain by dismantling our illusion of superiority and uniqueness. And this next book is middle grade nonfiction, and it is oral presentations by animals, about animals, for animals. Because who needs another book by humans? All they do is make animals super boring. My presentation today is about the Anaconda, and it's by a Dutch author, Bibi Dumon Tak, who has received many accolades in the Netherlands for her work. And of the many books that she's written, the only one that I've read is Miekjes and the Donkey, which I remember enjoying. This one's translated from Dutch by Nancy Forest-Flier. I loved this. It's got all these illustrations by another much honored Dutch creator, Annemarie van Haeringen. And I will show you some of the illustrations in here. She uses a lot of different artistic techniques to make them. So the book is whimsical, but it also is full of really interesting facts and true information. The earthworms presentation is about the anaconda. The cleaner fish talks about sharks. The fruit fly talks about the scarlet lily beetle and talks about how the larva of the scarlet lily beetle is really tasty, and in order to protect itself from predators, it puts on a suit of its own poop, which I can imagine kids would love hearing about. There's all of this banter and question from the audience of animals. So I'm going to read a little bit to give you an idea. I'll read from the section on the midwife toad, talking about the koala. So she does say that there are many similarities as well as differences between amphibians and marsupials. And at the end, are there any questions? Go ahead, rabbit. Well, with us rabbits, you never know who your father is. It's all kind of mixed up. With the midwife toad, you know exactly who your father is, since the male impregnates his wife while he's pulling the eggs out of her. Then he immediately winds the eggs around his legs. He knows for certain that he's the father of his children. But how does that work with koalas? What a good question. Yes, koala mothers also know who the father of their baby is. How do they know? Just tell us. When it comes to this sort of thing, nothing is too weird for rabbits. What sort of thing do you mean? Making babies. Oh, okay. Well, when a koala female and a koala male mate? You mean have sex? Yes, that's right. Go on, midwife toad, I'm all ears. Fortunately, rabbits have very long ears. Ah! Let me put it this way. After mating, the last bit of semen from the koala male hardens. It turns into a kind of clay. Woohoo! Guys, did you hear that? The koalas shut the whole thing down. That hard semen makes sure that the female can't get pregnant again by another male. but I'd rather leave it at that. No, we want more. Boy, oh boy, how did koalas come up with this stuff? Nothing is strange, Rabbit. All animals are different, aren't they? Although we midwife toads do have a little bit in common with marsupials. Any more questions? No? Then I'll just soon stop right there. This is so much fun. Even the index is not only informative but entertaining. And while the primary audience is middle school, recommend it for adults too. Well, this might be a bit of a stretch, but I'm going to go from snakes to ladders because the cover of the North American edition of Open Heaven by Seán Hewitt has this ladder on the cover. I listened to the audiobook read by Sebastian Croft. And so Seán Hewitt is an Irish-English poet, and this is his debut novel. He's gay, and the story is a gay coming-of-age set in a small town in the north of England. And as I was reading it, or listening to it, right from the beginning, I was getting images in my head of the setting. So, as I mentioned, he's a poet. He describes things, and I could just imagine it all, and felt great to do that. The story itself is very quiet and introspective. A man is looking back on his youth and his experience of first love, and the depiction of different kinds of love make this coming-of-age story stand out, in addition to the writing, the gorgeous prose. So I enjoyed this book, and it's not long. I think the audio is only about 6 hours long. And the book that I have just started, the next up, is A Snake and a Feathered Bird by Angie Ellis. This is another coming-of-age story, and it is set right here on Vancouver Island, where I live, and it opens in 1875. So I read the first line. He sat in front of the fiery-haired woman on her horse. And the image that came to mind was a boy seated on the ground in front of a woman who was on a horse. And then I was thinking, oh, yeah, because he won't be sitting in a chair. He must be on the ground. And I continued to read and realized, oh, the boy is sitting in front of the woman, both of them on the horse. So even when my mind is making mistakes, I'm still happy about pictures coming into my head. So that is all I've got for you today. Tell me if you are a person who has pictures when you read, and tell me if you have read any of these books or if you're interested in picking them up. Do you happen to be somebody who is interested in snakes? Like me, love snakes. I even have a tattoo of a snake on my arm. I'll talk to you again soon. Happy reading, everybody. Bye for now.